Hello, everyone. My name is Sumeet Verlekar. I'm the founder of Tilden Global Education Mentors. We are a premier admissions consulting firm based out of various cities across the world, and we work with people over 37 countries across various different programs. So today we are absolutely overjoyed to have Ananya Vyapak. Ananya has been a client of ours from the M.Fin cohort for 2024, and she has gained admission to a host of prestigious universities worldwide. So we are here to talk to Ananya about her own unique perspectives about the process and various insights that will really help some of you guys who are interested in following the same path, right? To get a lot of insights and a lot of value additions from Ananya directly. Hi, Ananya.
Hi, Sumit.
So, Ananya, the first thing, right, that we would absolutely love to understand. First of all, congratulations, right? I think uh, getting into like top schools, right, the ones you have is incredibly rare, and you have so many of them. So, hearty congratulations for your
Thank
success.
you. Thank you so much. And I think I really couldn't have done it without your help and guidance. So thank you for all of that.
Well, then, thanks so much for the kind words. So I just want to go maybe a year back, right? Because a lot of people, there are lots and lots of people who will be watching this video. And one of the biggest questions they have in mind is about, oh, what is my profile good enough, right? And is that something I should be pursuing as well? So the first question is, it would really help a lot of these viewers if you could discuss your profile briefly and talk about what do you feel are the most salient parts about it.
Yeah. So honestly, when I started, I think that was the main concern which I had as well. Because if I looked at my profile, I was like, there's nothing which stands out on my profile. But I think it's really about how authentic your profile is and how you build it up. So one advice would be to start early. The earlier you start, the more time you have to kind of work on, certain things in your profile. So one of the things I think was is always helpful is to have a good GMAT score. Uh, so I think to start off with, you can have a good GMAT score anywhere upwards of probably, as per the new edition, upwards of six, whatever is the new benchmark. So my GMAT score was 740, which was decent. And in addition to that, in my extracurriculars, I was a part of a few college clubs, which I had pursued over the last, 2 years, first year and second year. So I had certain leadership roles to show in those clubs. And in addition to that, I was pursuing my CFA. So when I applied, I had completed my CFA level 1 and I was preparing for my CFA level 2. Since I was applying for an MFin degree, the CFA, I think, really complemented my study background. So I think these are probably the major highlights. I also had certain internships. So I had two internships which I had done. I'd done an internship in equity research with Nippon India, and I'd done an internship in equity valuation with Ernst & Young. So I think just all of these things were basically what my profile comprised of, but I think they were quite helpful.
Right. And I think, one small addition to that is Ananya hails from NMIMS, right, which is
Yeah.
one of the prestigious universities based out of Mumbai. So just wanted to add that little bit to what you said, Ananya, as well. So thank you so much for providing the viewers the background. So the first, as we discussed, right, the million-dollar question often becomes, which we get from everyone, and I'm sure that you had this question as well as, what are my chances, right? Or am I good enough, right? Is my profile good enough for applying to some of these programs, especially the prestigious schools? So, any kind of, how did you, if you could maybe spend a bit of time first discussing about MFin, right, as a program, right? What prompted you to apply to the MFin program? And the next follow-up question to that is, how did you self-evaluate what parameters, etc., you used to figure out if you were competitive enough to start the process?
Yeah. So my MFin journey started with actually the fact that I knew very early on that I wanted to do an MBA. Because I knew I wanted to do an MBA, I knew that I wanted to make my profile stronger. And while NMIMS is a great brand name, in addition, I wanted to add a little more to my profile, and I also wanted to learn more about finance. So both those things kind of helped me choose very. It was a pretty obvious choice for me that masters in finance is the way to go. It was a great opportunity for me to network, meet people from around the world, and at the same time add something more to my resume so that it makes my MBA application stronger in the future. So I decided probably in my first year that I would be wanting to do a master's in finance. Uh, After that, when it came to my profile, like I said, I was very doubtful. I was like, there's nothing on my profile. Why would they take me? But eventually, as I started looking through people's LinkedIn, and I connected with a few alumni, I spoke to a few of my seniors, and they all said that as long as whatever you have, it's good enough, and you just need to make sure that you convey your conviction in your essays, and you tie everything that you've done together to kind of show them that why you are interested in that program. So I think that was what really helped. And the reassurance, of course, from you, from my parents, and from all my friends that no, the profile is good enough. Having said that, I think, like I said earlier, a strong GPA, a strong GMAT, and some good internships definitely really help a lot.
Awesome. So that was basically about how she ended up choosing MFin. So yeah, the one very important thing, guys, that we've learned here is you kind of look at your career like a few steps. It's not, joining the MFin is not the end in itself. What do you want to do beyond that? And in her case, MFin seems to be a step towards the MBA, which she will pursue in the future. So these are some of the different ways that people think about what programs they want to join for sure. And obviously, she also talked about some of the different parameters that she used. So while that is all great, right? I mean, a good GPA, a good GMAT, obviously doing a ton of really good internships, all of those things. I'm sure that Ananya, you also had, like many other people, some apprehensions, right, or some challenges that you felt, right, about the program, the application process, and so on and so forth. So any kind of apprehensions or challenges that you had or doubts you had in mind, if you could just kind of say that aloud,
Yeah.
to whatever extent you're comfortable, of course, right?
Yeah.
Great.
So I think the first one is that I'm not someone who writes very well. Like, I'm genuinely not the best writer. And I hadn't gone through the undergrad process of, writing application essays and all during that stage. But I'd seen my friends do it, and it was something which I was always very afraid of. So for me, one of the biggest challenges was how will I tackle those essays? Because every college requires a different essay, a different approach.
Yeah.
So for me, one of the biggest things I had in my mind was that I need to get my essay sorted because it was something which I was very scared about. So essays, my resume, I had a resume, but I knew that it had to be polished a lot for all of these places. And because these are more professional courses, they obviously require a higher standard of your resume. So I think those were very application specific. Uh, Other than that, I think one of the main questions was which school to choose because there were just so many options. About where to apply, how to apply.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so like I said, I had not gone through, a lot of people go abroad for their undergraduate and they've gone through that entire admissions process. I hadn't. So I was extremely new. So navigating that process itself took me a while to understand what all would be the requirements, how much time will I have to devote. And another challenge which I felt was kind of NMIMS is a fairly demanding university. So balancing studies, CFA, and the entire application process. So I think that those were some apprehensions which I had, whether I'll be able to do it or not. But I think what really helped was taking professional help and starting really early. I started, I remember by last July, I had completed my GMAT. So I had enough time to kind of give to my essays and the entire application and prepare for interviews. So those things really helped.
Awesome. So thank you for that. So now let's without further ado, let's get into like just demystifying this entire thing called the application process, right? So if you could talk about sort of the time frame, right, from end to end, like what kind of, like, what's the period like, right? Uh, what's the kind of commitment, right? Because these are some of the important things that people want to consider is how many hours a day would I need to devote to it, right? And lastly, what are the different steps, right? And that would be wonderful for us to understand, all the viewers listening here.
So I think firstly, the most important step is to decide what you want to do so that you can, devote your time to kind of that one focused thing. For me, I started my GMAT prep, I think about in February or March last year. And I ended up taking my GMAT in June. End of June was when I took my GMAT, and I kind of had my score. I had my internships. I had one of my internship going on up till mid-July. So I think mid-July is when I had my GMAT score done. I had one of my Ernst & Young internship had ended. So then I kind of, and college had just started, so I had enough time to kind of focus. That's when I started, talking to a lot of my alumni, discussing how to go about it, and all of those things, and really going to, every college website, seeing what all is needed. uh, yeah, I think July was the period where I did sort of self research, and July to mid August. And then I started my journey with Tilden, I think about September. Mid September was when I had my first interaction with Sumit, I think. And the first thing we started was working on the resume. And then, I applied to 5 schools. So out of those 5 schools, then, periodically I had to balance my exams and everything. But eventually we started working on each essay and each resume or whatever application requirements were there. Uh, but having said that, I think it was almost like a good 9 month process because I started last March, I think, and it ended early Jan this year. So it does require a time commitment. This process obviously includes the time you need for GMAT preps. If someone's already done it or they have it under control, then probably it'll take about 3 to 4 months maybe. Uh, but yeah, I think for me it was a longer process. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to summarize, what you're saying is, from like starting with the GMAT, including the GMAT process, which might take what, 3 to around 4 5 months roughly, right, for people to potentially get their score. Some people obviously will take more time. Some people will take less time. But on an average, about 3 to 4 months for the GMAT, and maybe about 6 months roughly for the applications, right? Or
Yeah.
that would be a fair summary, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now let's kind of dive into the process, right? You talked about the much dreaded essays, and obviously there's resume, there's letters of recommendation. So it would be great to kind of discuss what was your approach to some of these, to writing some of these application documents. Any sort of tips, advice, best practices that you would like to share with the audience.
Think to start off with the resume was definitely the advice that I got from you was to make it very quantitative, like to quantify everything on the resume and not keep it very generic. Make sure that whatever you've done at your internships or, even in a college club that you're a part of, you're able to put it in quantitative terms so that it just stands out better. And obviously, Harvard and a lot of different universities have a list of action verbs which they prefer you to use. So I went up and I searched some of those, action verbs which can be used, uh, and just following a simple resume format. So like I was applying to certain universities. LBS is one where I applied. So I kind of looked up the LBS resume format and I made sure that my resume format was as close to the one which LBS has as possible. So I think those are just basic resume tips which really help. And because resume is one common doc which you can submit to all the places where you're applying, it makes sense to devote a lot of your time to, actually enhancing that resume. The next thing I approached was my letters of recommendation. Sometimes it can be a lengthy process for you to kind of, you know, firstly get your recommenders on board, and then they might need a certain amount of time to draft your recommendations, and then making sure that they filled it before the application deadline and all. So I started with my recommendation process next. I think about October or mid-October was when I approached my recommenders and I requested for recommendations. So that is again one place where I think the earlier you start, the better. And I'd actually informed them that I'd be needing recommendations like a semester in advance. So they were mentally prepared, and it helped to kind of, then it was a smoother process. I didn't have to worry about deadlines or whether they've submitted the resume at the last moment or the recommendation at the last moment or no. And then, yeah, obviously, we came the application essays. I think what it requires first is a lot of self-awareness about where you are today, where you want to go, and how the program will really help you. It required a lot of research also, researching, really deeply into what the school is, what every school is, what the program offers, and what's the culture like, what's the environment, and why each school is unique. And you have to include those aspects in your essay to really show your conviction for getting into that school. So I think that takes a fair amount of research and, trial. It takes a fair amount of edits as well. So I would make a draft and I would send it to Sumit, and then all of that process it's a fairly long one, especially getting that first essay right. I think it gets a lot easier after you've got one or two essays right. But initially getting the one essay right was a lengthy process. Uh, and also connecting with a lot of school alumni and taking the insights, because I realized a lot of my applications had uh, they had specific questions which said, have you attended any school events or have you connected to any of our alumni? So yeah, I would say that if you are looking to apply anywhere, uh, most of the good B schools have a lot of online events, Zoom events, which they host. And they specifically have a section in the application where they ask, have you attended any of these events or have you gotten in touch with any of the alumni? So it would be really helpful if you have something to write over there and if you attend sessions. So I had attended almost at least one session of every school that I was applying to. So that was again quite helpful. And it also gives us a better perspective about what the school is and what all it has to offer.
Right. So, I mean, just one thing that struck me, right? You talked about the different things that you did, right? One key thing is to really kind of develop a strategy, right? What you've done XYZ, correct? And this is like a general thing that, like, we really like to see what you have done and then create like a strategy. What is it that you pitch, isn't it? To the school, and that's important. And then obviously being able to showcase a lot of evidence and interest around it is very, very important. The next thing which Ananya mentioned, which was super important, is do not treat this process like you have to nail the process, or you have to nail. It's not like a test. You know what I'm saying? It's very important to truly take the time to understand the school, right? So Ananya has not mentioned the names of the schools besides LBS, but she has gotten into a fair number of prestigious schools, all ranked in like the top 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of a range, right? So these are really, really prestigious schools. um, Getting into these schools obviously takes a lot of effort, great strategy, and a lot of positive stuff happening around you. But also equally, your understanding of the school is very, very important. And being able to network with alumni, students, and also attending some of these sessions that the schools organize around the year is, I cannot endorse you attending it, more and more, because every conversation, every interaction, you really can learn something new, which can in turn help you, right? So that's kind of the overall what I would say to that. But absolutely bang on. Thank you so much for that. One quick question I had was regarding any specific in terms of now that you've gone through the process, right? Are there any specific learnings, like big or small, that you had? And if there was anything that you would do differently now that you have gone through the process?
I think the first learning would be that it's very, very important to kind of know your story well. To be able to pitch it to someone, you need to be fully convinced about your story. You need to have a clear career path chalked out, especially because, the M.Fin or any such program is a graduate program. They expect you to have a fair idea of what you want to do with your career and how the program will help with the career. So it's always good to kind of have a broader view of which industry you want to be working in and which sector and stuff like that. Uh, I think that's one learning. For me, that required a lot of introspection because I knew I wanted to work in finance, but then to narrow it down to what in finance, it took a fair amount of time. It took about talking to a lot of people, my dad, his colleagues. So yeah, I think the earlier you start on that, the better. Uh, Number two, I think would definitely be you know your internships play a very important role, so not just for your application, but they're great learning points as well. So the better the internship, or even for that matter a little bit, the better the brand name, the better, because universities abroad, they tend to recognize brand names. So if you can get a good brand name, or if you can get into a bulge bracket or something, nothing like that, I didn't have it, but if you can, then it's obviously a huge plus on your resume and your application. uh, and just yeah, you've got to be a little patient with the process, because sometimes there were times when I was just so frustrated because there were so many things to be done, and you feel like you're just stuck on one part, but it takes time, but eventually it just sorts out and it fits into place. uh, that, and I think my learning would be, I still feel like I started networking really late in the process. But it's all, if someone really wants to get into these schools and you know where you want to be applying, kind of start getting in touch with alumni or current students a lot earlier. Because it's also a time consuming process to match your schedule with theirs and then schedule a call, or sometimes they had finals or I had exams going on, or those sorts of things. So it's always best to start as early as possible. Uh, yeah, those are a few things which I would say. And I feel like my GMAT score was decent, but obviously if someone can get a higher GMAT score, 760 equivalent, it's a plus point.
Thanks. I think you covered a lot of different areas. So, guys, I hope you listened carefully and took notes, because these are all really, really crucial points. And I guess one of the key things in the process also that I saw, Ananya, you grow tremendously, is to spend time on what matters, right? I think that is something which is a challenge, because obviously you're new to the process, you're wading in, and sometimes the division of time is also done equally in that sense. If there are three types of documents, you basically allocate similar amount of time, but then you realize that from a relative weightage perspective, the impact perspective, and also the time commitment perspective, right, those demands could be different, right? So again, I think it's important to also devote the commensurate amount of time to the
Yeah.
specific the document. There are certain things which may not be as important as they seem, and on the other hand, vice versa is also true, right? So that's another, like, just learning that I've had, having
Yeah.
worked with so many different applicants, that really kind of work with your mentor, figure out what is important, and then really invest that time in like really behind, because then you will get outstanding results if you're investing the right time in the right kind of a
And
place.
just one more thing, I think, so I applied to, like, for example, in LBS, I applied in round two. In Oxford, when I applied in round two. But the UK universities are actually quite specific that the earlier you apply, the better. And a lot of the round one deadlines are actually September or October. So if someone has a fair, clear idea of which programs they want to be applying to, especially for UK, I think the earlier you apply, the better it is, because US has very clear deadlines and they say that they would not be assessing applications before that, or they're very clear that they have just one deadline. But sorry, the US, but the UK, they prefer earlier the application, better it is. Higher your chances of getting in. I think that was one thing which was repeatedly said in most of my LBS events that I attended, admission events, that they said, if you can apply in round one, your chances of getting in are the highest. And it progressively goes down. So I think, yeah, that is something which one can try keeping in mind and try applying early.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That being said, obviously, right? I'm sure that Ananya, you would agree that you apply when you are at your strongest, right? Obviously, there's you cannot be presenting a weak application in an earlier round, right?
Definitely,
It,
yeah.
it would be advisable, of course, if you're ready and if you everything is going well for you, you're kind of done with your GMAT, your essays, your applications, all of that stuff is done ahead of time. By all means, go and apply, right? But I would also say, and Ananya, I hope you agree that you should apply when you're really ready, and that's also an important thing that you guys you should
Definitely,
think
I
about.
think. Yeah, yeah. My purpose of saying early was that then you have to start the process progressively earlier. So, like, if
Absolutely,
you plan on
absolutely.
starting in September, then you need to start in Jan. If I plan on applying in September, then you start in Jan. So, yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
definitely the application is priority. So, unless your application is top notch, there's no point. Kind of.
absolutely. So, which brings us to the very last question of the day is now that, there's a bunch of people listening to this, and, obviously, what advice would you have for them? Obviously, you've doled out a lot of important and interesting points for them to consider. But any last parting words that you would ask people to keep in mind and, as they kind of start the process?
Like I said, I think it's the process can get overwhelming at times, but you just need to kind of keep going, uh, do your research, talk to people, take help, and just make sure that your story or whatever essays you write or whatever documents you submit, at the end of the day, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be you. So, you can, they want humans. And I think what I learned from most of my interviews was also that they are looking for people who are actually, they want humans. They do not want robots.
Yeah.
So make sure that your application reflects a very authentic version of who you are and your career story. And I know a lot of people who got into LBS or MIT and all of those places who actually wrote in their applications that they were not certain of their career path and stuff like that. So they appreciate honesty. So yeah, those were just some things which are very important that uh, you know stress on things which actually matter and don't try to achieve perfection in your application. uh,
Mhm.
Start early and yeah, I think recommenders play a very important role. So make sure that you get recommendations from people who really know you well. For example, I know during my MIT interview, my interviewer actually told me that your recommendations were very good. So it's always helpful to have strong recommendations from people who can talk about, you as a person and what you've actually done, rather than just something which is very, not as deep. So yeah, recommendations will definitely play a huge part. So focus on that. And then ultimately it kind of comes down to a combination of all, but definitely your academics and the essays are also very, very important, or I'd say the most important.
Awesome. Right. So, can you tell, as a parting thing, can you tell them what all schools you applied to, and yeah, where you got your.
So I applied to Chicago Booth, MIT, Columbia, Oxford, LSE, and LBS. And I got into Chicago, MIT, LBS, and LSE. So those were the schools I got into. And I'm going to London Business School for the Masters in Financial Analysis program. So yeah, that's where I'm going. It was a difficult choice, but yeah, that's the one which I chose.
Yeah, I mean it's a choice of plenty. I wish you all the very best. I mean, all those choices are incredible choices, and I'm just so proud and so happy that you have been able to achieve and get an admit into some of these programs. And I also wish all of you viewers that all the very best, and hopefully you are in the same role same position as Ananya is, getting admits from so many amazing schools. So yeah, with that, I thank you, Ananya, again for your time. And I also thank all the viewers and wish all of you guys good luck. Ananya, good luck for your future moves and career. And yeah, I think that's basically it. We will conclude now.
Thank you so much, Sumit. Thank you for all the help through the entire process. I really think it was very, very, very helpful to have you on board and help me and guide me through the entire process of the essays and all of that.
Well, thank you so much again. All right. So with that, we will conclude. Thanks again. And we will have our contact details in the description, but you can reach out to us on tilden.in. This is www.tilden.in, which is the logo right behind me. And also connect, CONNECT @tilden.in is the support team's email. You can reach out to them and they'll be happy to evaluate your profile and give you an authentic feedback about, whether you should not, all of that stuff, right? So all the best. Hopefully we'll interact soon. And to Ananya, I say goodbye again and good luck to everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.